Kahani Bar brings you a cocktail of stories in English and in Hindustani. I am Richa, and today's story is from Fauji Heart, a collection of human stories with the backdrop of Indian Army. Written for you by Neerja K, these stories will sometimes bring a smile and sometimes a tear, but they will always allow you to peek into the lives of the human beings who are often hidden behind that stiff uniform.
And today we have for you who started the 1971 war. January 1972, the nation was intoxicated by its victory over Pakistan. General Manekshaw was being hero worshipped by the entire country. After all, Pakistan had been squarely defeated on all fronts, and their troops had surrendered and laid arms in East Pakistan. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had earned the status of Durga. Captain Karan Kapoor, along with many other young officers, was nursing his war wounds in the officers' ward at the Delhi Military Hospital. At the moment, the recuperating officers were a highly pampered lot. They were being treated like royalty. Each meal seemed like a feast, especially after the hardships of war. Their high-profile visitors included the President, the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister, and the Army Chief. They even had some glamorous visitors from the film industry. They were war heroes after all. Besides the dignitaries and celebrities, daily visiting hours were chock-a-block with a continuous stream young mademoiselles who brought them cards, chocolates, magazines, books, board games, hand-knitted woolen scarves, socks, and what-not. It seemed that winning a war had caused the attractiveness index of army officers to skyrocket. Never before had they had the chance to interact with so many young and beautiful girls. For the war heroes, this was a golden opportunity to strike a lifetime alliance with the fairer sex. They were not likely to get such a chance again. Several of them got lucky, but not Karan. It wasn't because there was something wrong with him. In fact, quite the opposite. He was undoubtedly the most dashing and handsome guy in the entire hospital. But every time a beautiful damsel came by, he would barely look up and talk to her. He was always fiddling with his little transistor radio, trying to tune in to the post-war analysis and discussions. His mates in the ward were confounded by this obsession and his ability to tune out the most beautiful creature sitting at his bedside. They warned him that he would miss this golden opportunity. The glory would fade soon and the fans would stop coming in. But Captain Karan Kapoor continued to favor the airwaves over his attractive visitors. Apart from his scheduled physical therapy, Karan spent all his time glued to his portable transistor. He would listen intently to the varied theories of the analysts as to who had started the 1971 war. Could it have been averted, thus saving many lives and much money? Could East Pakistan have been freed from Pakistan without a war? The questions were many, and the discussions went back and forth. During these broadcasts, Karan would often chuckle and shake his head in amusement, inviting surprised looks from his ward mates. He had not shared his secret with a single soul. The most intensely debated topic over the airwaves was who had actually started the war. Irrespective of what was being said and by whom, Karan alone knew who had started the 71 war. Karan had been preparing for the routine monthly patrol to the last post on the Indo-China border, along the formidable Karakoram range. This large mountain range spans the borders between Pakistan, India, and China. It is actually the northwestern extension of the Himalayas. The main purpose of these monthly visits was to ensure that the Indian flag was still present at the post. It was not a fluttering Indian cloth flag, but a tricolour painted on a thick metal sheet attached to two poles that were deeply embedded in the rocky ground. His pony was also getting ready for the long and treacherous journey. Karan had not been looking forward to the adventure. Well, no sane person would, not even the pony. The terrain was unforgiving, the weather ruthless, and dicey winds blew at a bone-chilling speed. Nonetheless, what was to be done had to be done. There was no escape. He had set off with his Sahayak, each on their own pony, carrying enough packed food and water to last the trip, plus some extra for an emergency. A third pony carried a new metal flag, in case they needed to replace the existing one. One never knew what condition the savage enemy would have left it in. The enemy there wasn't the soldiers of China or Pakistan, it was the ferocious winds. Continuous speeding winds often left the metal flag dented badly or sometimes even ripped beyond repair. Whatever the weather conditions, the tricolour had to be kept up high. Hence, the monthly visits were a must. On these trips, Karan always filled his pockets with chakarvaras, his emergency ration. Hunger was one thing he could not bear. He often thought that during a war, he would not die in battle because hunger would get him first, before the enemy. Knowing his pockets were laden with food always made Karan seem more confident of facing any eventuality. As the three ponies fell into a rhythmic but languid march, Karan tried to maintain a distance from his Sahayak. His pony trudged along the dangerous track a little reluctantly at first, and then, as he became more sure-footed, Karan also relaxed a little in the saddle. On his right was the mountain wall, and on his left there was a deep ravine. The vegetation was negligible, but the sky and the fast-moving clouds were straight out of a beautiful painting. The path did not appear very scary, but he knew that as he moved ahead and gained height, it would worsen. This was not his first time. A mountaineer of some repute, he loved mountains. They never intimidated him. In fact, he had been one of the first ones to set foot on the 22,272-foot virgin Funangma Peak in eastern Karakoram just last year. He always felt the mountains beckoned him with a challenge. He would have been quite content in these bare mountains and valleys were it not for the heavy loneliness that tugged at his heart. He was one of those unlucky young officers who had been posted from one field area to another. That basically meant from one wilderness to another. Neither by desire nor by design, it just turned out that way. The only letters he got were from his mother. He had no time to find a girlfriend. If he had one, at least he could have overcome his loneliness writing letters to her. But alas, he was single and desperate to mingle. Time was slipping away, and if this trend continued, where and how would he find his lady love? His good looks and dashing style were getting wasted on the ponies and Sahayaks. His mother was desperately looking forward to his getting home, so she could show him prospective brides. But Karan could not see himself getting married to a total stranger, so an arranged marriage was also out of the question. All he could do, struck here in the middle of nowhere, was daydream about his future girlfriend. Karan and his pony had reached a considerable altitude by now. He stared at the deep blue sky above and wondered where and when he would find his sweetheart. He had already formed a portrait of hers in his mind using colors from the palette of his imagination. He often dreamt about her with his eyes open, mostly during journeys such as this. It was this fantasy that kept him going. By the time he reached the halfway point, they had gained considerable height. It was a customary pit stop of sorts. The ponies would rest a bit while the men took a pee break. Karan brought his pony to a halt and got off the saddle and stretched himself, releasing a few frozen joints. He walked a few feet away from his pony and found a suitable place to relieve himself. A vast valley lay before him, and the mountain wall behind rose steeply along the narrow, meandering pony track. The ruggedness of the area continued to fascinate him as he went about his business. He had nearly finished pulling up a zipper when he heard a clattering sound. His hand instinctively went straight to his breast pocket where he had secured his imported Ray-Ban glares. Thankfully, he found them resting safely in his pocket. He peered down the edge of the precipice, looking for the source of the noise, hoping to see a small rock tumbling down the mountainside. He froze when his eyes spied the falling object. It was nearly 20 feet down by now and was continuing to fall towards the narrow creek that threaded along the base of the mountain. As the object continued its free fall, the chances of its retrieval appeared to rapidly evaporate. Ultimately, it came to a stop, but by now it was more than 200 feet below where Karan stood. Between them was a vertical rock face with barely a foothold in sight. The fallen object just lay there, taunting him. Karan was shocked and transfixed. It was a full magazine that had come loose from Captain Karan's weapon. No words could capture the enormity of this hopeless situation. He was paralyzed with despair. He could almost see his own court of inquiry unfolding scene by scene in front of his eyes. In the army, every article is documented and accounted for. Even mundane items like dekchis, dhakkans, and mosquito nets are numbered and tracked. So of course, weapons are far more serious business. Not only is every weapon monitored, but also every single bullet and piece of ammunition fired or otherwise is accounted for. And now, here was a full magazine resting 200 feet down a ravine. This was grounds for a court of inquiry for Captain Karan Kapoor. An event that barely lasted a few seconds had suddenly plunged his career prospects into abject darkness. Was this how his career in the army was destined to crash and burn? He wondered in disbelief. How could this be happening to him of all people? He was the one that always rescued other soldiers caught in a similar predicament. Karan recalled how he had jumped into a deep well once just to retrieve a mere 12-inch dekchi to set an example for his troops. Or the other time when one of the soldiers had fallen into a blind well while on a route march. The soldier had been miraculously rescued, but his weapon and helmet had not been traceable. Not the one to give up, Karan had improvised a solution with bamboo poles to guide him on the numerous dives he made over a span of 3 days till he was finally able to recover the weapon and helmet from the murky depths of the nearly bottomless well. The soldier was overjoyed, and Karan was proud that he had been able to save his career. But now that Karan's own career was on the line, he felt completely overwrought at his helplessness. It was impossible to retrieve this magazine. To even attempt a rescue would be foolhardy. It was a lost cause. He fell to his knees and stared at it. No, there was nothing he could do. And then, still kneeling, he looked heavenwards. The sky was deep blue and cloudless. The wind was freezing. Only one thing could save him and his career now. A war. For only in wartime was no account kept of the ammunition used. It was just not possible to keep an account of the fired or unfired bullets. So only a war could save him. And for the first time in his life, he prayed. Really prayed. Down on his knees with his hands folded and eyes glued to the sky. He prayed for a war. Lying in his hospital bed now, he could barely recall the rest of his journey to replace the weather-worn metal tricolor. On the return journey, he had contemplated harakiri several times, but thoughts of his mother had kept him going and he had once again resorted to silent prayers. He had always been a bit of an atheist, but in this desperate time, he could think of nothing else. After he had chanted improvised prayers to all the major gods he could think of, he started to plan how he would break the news to his boss. The thought had sent shudders down his spine, and before he had finalized the speech in his head, his pony had trudged past the fence surrounding his base camp. The sentry had come rushing to meet him and had broken the most remarkable news that Karan had ever heard. Pakistan had just raided a number of Indian airports in northern India and war had been declared. Karan had been dumbfounded on hearing the news. He could hardly believe his ears or his luck. No, this was not luck. This was divine intervention. His prayers had been answered, and there was no doubt in his mind that it was his fervent pleas to the gods that had triggered the war of 1971. The analysts on the radio be damned. This divine intervention not only saved his career, but also gave him the opportunity to be awarded a gallantry medal for the role he went on to play in the ensuing war. While he had regained his faith in the Almighty, he had vowed never to pray again. His prayers had proved to be too potent, and there was no telling what terrible disasters his future entreaties to the gods might cause. Maybe he could make just one last prayer. He could do with a bit of celestial assistance in finding the woman of his dreams. Surely, no harm could come from making such a simple request to the Almighty, could it?
This is Richa signing off. Take good care of yourselves till I'm back with the next story.